He leaned over on the window, we rolled down the window.
There's been non-stop talk about who really killed Tupac, and now the cops swear they finally locked in that guy. But here's where things get wild. Jay-Z has always been somewhere in the background, and a fresh jaw-dropping detail just surfaced that could shut this whole case down for good. Let's rewind and break this down the right way. Blood on the Las Vegas Strip, flashing lights, and questions that never went away. What actually happened that night? It all jumps off on September 7th, 1996. Vegas was electric because Mike Tyson had just smashed Bruce Seldon in the first round at the MGM Grand. The fight was over in seconds, brutal and fast, and the crowd was still hype, still buzzing, still hungry for chaos after watching Iron Mike do what he does best. Right there in the front row, sitting ringside with the full Death Row Records crew, was Tupac Amaru Shakur. This wasn't just another night out for Pac. He was on top of the world. He had just dropped All Eyes on Me, a double-disc monster that people still argue was one of the greatest hip-hop albums ever. The charts were on lock, the streets were talking, and his name echoed through every hood in America. Standing next to him was Death Row's boss, Marion Suge Knight. Big presence, heavy reputation, and the man who had helped pull Tupac out of prison and launch him straight back into superstar mode. Now this is where the story turned serious, real serious. After the fight, as Tupac and his crew moved through the MGM Grand lobby, someone from Pac's camp spotted Orlando Baby Lane Anderson, a known Southside Compton Crips affiliate. And this wasn't random at all. Tension had already been boiling since July 1996, when Anderson and others were accused of trying to rob Trayvon Trey Lane, a known mob Piru connected to Suge Knight. So when Tupac saw Orlando standing there, he didn't pause or back down. He stepped up and asked if Anderson was from the South. Tupac didn't just step up, he swung. He punched Orlando Anderson and dropped him to the floor. Suge Knight and others jumped in for a quick beatdown, and MGM security cameras caught every second. MGM security rushed in and broke it up fast, but by then it was already too late. The spark was lit, and there was no pulling it back. And Tupac being Tupac, he didn't dwell on it. He brushed it off like nothing serious even happened. He headed back to his suite at the Luxor, told his girlfriend, Kidada Jones, about the scuffle, and said he'd be right back. No fear, no hesitation, just Pac moving like the night was still his. Not long after, he threw on a basketball jersey and slid into that now infamous black BMW 750IL with Suge Knight riding shotgun. They were headed to Club 662, a spot owned by Knight, where Tupac was set to perform at a charity event. What Pac didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that payback was already loading up. The streets moved fast. Word of the MGM Grand beatdown raced through the Southside Compton Crips like lightning. By around 11 p.m., retaliation was already being lined up. As Tupac's BMW stopped at a red light at East Flamingo Road and Culver Lane, a white four-door Cadillac sedan slowly pulled up next to him. Multiple accounts say Tupac was leaning out the window, laughing, vibing, talking to women in a nearby car. He was relaxed, feeling untouchable. He had no clue danger was rolling right beside him. What happened next was shake hip-hop to its core and leave a scar the culture still carries decades later. And this is where the confessions finally enter the picture. For years, nobody said a word. Witnesses stayed silent, stories vanished, and the streets locked up tight. Then Dwayne Keefe D, a former Southside Compton Crips figure, and Orlando Anderson's uncle started talking. You heard that right. Keefe D went on record, on camera, describing Orlando as the shooter in his 2019 memoir, breaking the silence that had lasted for decades.
Did you actually see a gun?
Oh, shit. Once he got the region, I got the ducking.
So someone from your car
That's what happened.
started shooting at Tupac and Suge.
Compton street legend Keefe D went into detail about that night, laying it all out. He said he was sitting in the front passenger seat of the white Cadillac with Terrence T. Brown driving. In the back seat were Orlando Anderson and DeAndre Big Dre Smith, locked in and ready. According to Keefe D, everything happened in seconds, and once the shots rang out, there was no turning back. Keefe D admitted he watched Suge Knight get grazed in the head by a bullet and honestly thought Suge was done for. But the real damage was aimed at Tupac. 4.40 caliber rounds were fired from a Glock 22. Tupac was hit twice in the chest, once in the arm and once in the thigh, with one bullet tearing through his right lung. It was brutal, fast, and unforgiving. Even while bleeding from his head and sitting in a car with a blown tire, Suge Knight somehow kept it together. He drove that shot-up BMW nearly a mile trying to get Tupac help. Think about that for a second. A wounded man driving a damaged car with his friend dying next to him, doing everything he could to reach safety. Say what you want about Suge, but in that moment, he was fighting to save Tupac's life. Police eventually pulled him over, and paramedics rushed Tupac to University Medical Center. Doctors performed emergency surgery and removed his right lung in a last-ditch effort to keep him alive. Tupac was placed in a medically induced coma, hooked up to life support, battling for every breath. His girlfriend, Kadada Jones, Quincy Jones's daughter, rushed to his bedside. She played Don McLean's Vincent on a CD player, and Tupac reportedly responded with a moan, moving his mouth as if to say he loved her. Even at the edge of life, Pac was still showing love. That was who he was. For 6 painful days, Tupac Shakur fought with everything he had. Then on September 13, 1996, at 4:03 p.m., he was pronounced dead from respiratory failure that led to cardiac arrest. His mother, Afena Shakur, made the heartbreaking decision to stop life support after revival attempts failed. And here's the part that still shocks people. For nearly 30 years, no one was charged. The case went ice cold. Witnesses stayed silent, and key figures started disappearing, including Yaki Gaddafi, who said he could identify the shooter and was killed in November 1996. Jay-Z's debut album, Reasonable Doubt, featured a track called Brooklyn's Finest, and it wasn't just any feature. It had the notorious B.I.G. right there beside it. That collaboration alone put Jay-Z straight into Tupac's line of sight. On that song, Biggie dropped slick lines that many took as quiet shots aimed at Tupac, and Tupac definitely felt it. At the time, rumors were flying heavy that Biggie's wife, Faith Evans, had been involved with Tupac, so when Biggie made certain references, Tupac took it as a clear provocation. And here's the key part. Jay-Z was on that track by association. He didn't say the lines, but in Tupac's eyes, that didn't matter at all. From Tupac's perspective, Jay-Z had picked a side, and Tupac didn't play the middle. On Bomb First, from his posthumous album, The Don Killuminati, The 7-Day Theory, Tupac went all in. He rapped, "I'm a bad boy killer, Jay-Z died too." Let that sink in for a second. This wasn't subtle. Tupac wasn't throwing light shade or lyrical jabs. He was issuing straight-up threats on wax. He wasn't just mad at Jay-Z. He lumped him in with Biggie, Puffy, Mobb Deep, and the entire East Coast power structure. In Tupac's world, if you stood next to his enemies, you were his enemy, no exceptions. There was no neutral zone, no "I'm just doing music." If you worked with Bad Boy or aligned with Biggie in any way, Tupac felt you made your choice, and once he felt crossed, he was coming full force. Now here's the wild part. Jay-Z and Tupac never even met face to face, not once. This whole tension was built on perception, alliances, and how moves looked from the outside. Jay-Z has said in interviews that there was no real reason for them to be against each other, explaining that everything came down to association, not personal beef. But that didn't mean Jay-Z was going to stay quiet, and this is where hip-hop history takes a legendary turn. According to DJ Clark Kent, a longtime collaborator who worked closely with Jay-Z since the early 1990s, Jay-Z recorded a diss track aimed directly at Tupac. Kent later described it as one of the hardest diss records he'd ever heard. 2 ruthless verses, no hesitation, no fear, and the kind of energy that left people stunned. The track was never released, but its reputation lives on as one of the most infamous unreleased songs in rap history. Picture this. Jay-Z, still new to the game, stepping up against one of the most feared lyricists ever. Tupac was known for crushing opponents on records. Hit 'Em Up is still considered one of the brutal diss tracks of all time. And yet Jay-Z, young, confident, and sharp, allegedly came back with something just as deadly. That diss track didn't just live in the studio, it was performed live, one single time. Jay-Z debuted it at Harlem's legendary Apollo Theater, rapping over the instrumental to Blackstreet's No Diggity. Let that sink in. The Apollo isn't just any stage, it's where careers get stamped or shut down instantly. That crowd is ruthless, and if you're not bringing heat, they'll boo you right off the mic. And Jay-Z picked that stage to respond to Tupac. According to DJ Clark Kent, the reaction was unreal. He said if Tupac had still been alive, there would be no way back from it. That's how sharp it was. That's how heavy it landed. But here's the twist. Jay-Z never released the track. Why? Because Tupac died before it could ever drop, and Jay-Z made the decision to keep it locked away out of respect. No rollout, no leak, no cash grab. Kent explained that about 2,000 people were in that Apollo crowd that night, yet no bootleg has ever surfaced. No recordings, no clips, nothing. That's what turned it into a legend. Jay-Z himself confirmed this story in a 2006 interview. He said, "We tried to find a tape. It's 2,000 people that know about it. I did 2 verses. It's the truth." He even described the feeling as freeing, being able to say exactly what you want to say on a record. That moment exists only in memory, and that mystery keeps the myth alive. Now, after Tupac's death, and then Biggie's murder just 6 months later in March 1997, something major shifted in hip-hop. A power vacuum opened up at the very top. The 2 biggest stars were gone, and the industry was suddenly wide open. Some voices in the culture started pointing out that Jay-Z was perfectly positioned to rise during that moment. Filmmaker Alan Hughes stirred debate in a 2023 interview when he said, "When you shoot the 2 A+ students in the class, Tupac and Biggie, the C student starts to rise." He was talking about Jay-Z. Now, Hughes also made it clear that Jay-Z's Brooklyn grind and work ethic turned opportunity into greatness. Still, the implication hit hard. Tragedy created space. The same argument is echoed online for years. A viral post from 2018 even claimed Jay-Z benefited the most from Tupac and Biggie's deaths if they had both lived.
Prodigy, you know what I'm saying? Like he was, I believe he was a Prodigy fan, like for sure, right? He used P sample, Illuminati with my mind, soul, in my body.
That's right.
He respected P.
Some critics go even further and say without Tupac and Biggie gone, Jay-Z might have stayed just another New York legend, not crowned as the so-called king of hip-hop. And this is where the conversation gets real controversial, because after Tupac's death, Jay-Z made a move that had the culture split straight down the middle. In 2002, Jay-Z sampled Tupac's "Me and My Girlfriend" for his hit '03 Bonnie and Clyde featuring Beyonce. For some fans, this felt like a respectful homage, especially since the sample was officially cleared by Tupac's estate, with the Feni Shakur personally giving a blessing. That part matters. But others didn't see it that way at all. Online debates, especially on Reddit, lit up with people calling the move questionable, even saying Jay-Z wouldn't have tried it if Tupac was still alive. To them, it felt uncomfortable, like crossing an invisible line, even if it was legal and approved. To be fair, Jay-Z has also shown public respect for Tupac's legacy in meaningful ways. At his 2003 Fade to Black concert in Madison Square Garden, promoted as his retirement show, he brought Feni Shakur on stage alongside Valletta Wallace, Biggie's mother. That moment was powerful. It symbolized healing, unity, and respect for 2 fallen icons during a time when hip-hop was still recovering from the damage of the 1990s. But the connections surrounding Tupac's murder don't stop there. Remember Keith D's confessions? In interviews and in his book, he didn't just talk about the people inside the car. He also made allegations that a major industry figure had offered a large cash reward targeting Tupac and Suge Knight. Those claims have been strongly denied by that individual's representatives, who've called them baseless and attention-seeking. Still, Tupac's family has reportedly hired investigators to examine any possible links, keeping the pressure alive as new legal developments continue to unfold in the industry. And this is where things start overlapping again. Jay-Z and that same industry figure have been connected for decades. They came up around the same time, moved in similar circles, and both rose into major mogul status as hip-hop exploded worldwide. So when a lawsuit filed in December 2024 made serious allegations involving Jay-Z and another high-profile figure connected to a post-2000 MTV VMAs afterparty, the hip-hop world stopped cold. The claims involve alleged misconduct toward a minor, which both parties have firmly denied, and the case remains unresolved. Important detail: these are allegations, not proven facts, but with past tensions, old rumors, and unfinished business still floating around, people are watching closely, wondering what else could surface as history keeps colliding with the present. Jay-Z came out swinging against those allegations. He flat out denied everything, calling it a blackmail attempt and refusing to settle under no circumstances. He made it clear he wasn't paying a single cent. His attorney, Alex Spiro, publicly labeled the claims provably and demonstrably false, and by February 2025, the case was officially dismissed. That chapter closed fast, but it raised new questions. Because this wasn't Jay-Z's first time brushing up against violence or legal trouble, and that takes us straight into part 3, where things get even deeper. This is where decades of hip-hop history start connecting in unexpected ways. From Marcy projects to mogul status, Jay-Z's past and how it overlaps with Tupac's legacy needs a closer look. We've already broken down the murder, the East Coast versus West Coast war, and Jay-Z's place in that chaos. But to really understand how all these pieces lock together, you have to look at who Jay-Z was before the fame, the money, and the boardrooms. Jay-Z didn't grow up wealthy. He didn't come from privilege. He came up in Brooklyn's Marcy projects during the height of the crack epidemic, one of the most dangerous and unstable periods in American urban history. That environment shaped everything. Now here's one of the most shocking details, and it comes straight from Jay-Z himself. In his 2010 memoir, Decoded, he admitted that at just 12 years old, he shot his older brother Eric in the shoulder. The reason? Eric had stolen his ring to buy crack cocaine. That moment changed everything. Jay-Z described being absolutely terrified afterwards, believing his life was over. He said it was a horrible moment and made it clear that he was just a child, scared and overwhelmed. Eric didn't press charges and later apologized, acknowledging how addiction had damaged their family. Jay-Z has since reflected on that incident as a desperate act by a kid growing up surrounded by guns, where violence and shootouts weren't normal, they were necessary. Survival in a broken environment. But that wasn't the end of his exposure to danger. As a teenager, Jay-Z sold drugs in Brooklyn and later in Trenton, New Jersey, moving under the street name of Jazzy. That life came with constant risk. He said he was shot at 3 separate times during that era and somehow walked away unharmed. Looking back, Jay-Z credited his survival to luck and something watching over him. By the late 1990s, he had escaped the streets, but the scars from that world never fully left, and those experiences would later shape the music, the mindset, and the controversies that followed him into superstardom. Even as Jay-Z's rap career was starting to explode, he was still tangled up in real street drama. In December 1999, things boiled over at the Kit Kat Club in New York during the release party for Q-Tip's album. Jay-Z got into an altercation with record producer Lance Rivera, which ended with Rivera being stabbed. At the time, Jay-Z believed Rivera had something to do with bootlegging his upcoming album, and that suspicion pushed everything over the edge. Jay-Z was initially charged with first-degree assault and pleaded not guilty, but in 2001, he changed his plea to guilty on a lesser third-degree assault charge and was sentenced to 3 years of probation. In his memoir, Decoded, Jay-Z admitted he blacked out with anger that night. He described losing control and later promised himself he'd never let rage take him there again. It was a rare moment of accountability from an artist who usually keeps things tight-lipped. But here's where the story twists again. In 2023, Lance Rivera publicly recanted, saying Jay-Z was not the person who stabbed him. That statement reignited debate around the incident and added new layers to a story many thought was already settled. That suggests that even some of Jay-Z's most well-known violent moments may be more complicated than they appear. So why does any of this matter when we're talking about Tupac's murder? Because it paints a clear picture of the era. The late 1990s were rough across hip-hop. Violence wasn't just in lyrics, it was spilling into real life. Arrests, altercations, and legal trouble followed multiple major figures in the industry during that time. This wasn't just rap beef on records, it was street energy bleeding straight into the music business. Tensions were high, egos were clashing, and consequences were real. And there's one more rivalry that ties directly into this whole story: Jay-Z versus Mobb Deep. Mobb Deep was also on Tupac's radar, and their conflict connects directly to both Tupac and Jay-Z in ways most people overlook. That clash adds another layer to this already tangled web, and once you break it down, it explains a lot about how dangerous that era of hip-hop really was.
He respected P, looked at Venom, he looked as a lyricist, as a top lyricist. So when he found out that Prodigy said something about him not to his liking, you know what I'm saying, in a magazine, you know, and he's competitive.
That was Havoc from Mobb Deep admitting something that surprises a lot of people. He said he was actually glad when Tupac dissed him. Why? Because in hip-hop, even negative attention from a superstar is still attention. It meant they were being seen, respected, and taken seriously. And here's where it circles back to Jay-Z. The tension between Mobb Deep and Jay-Z kicked off in 2001 after Prodigy criticized Jay-Z in a magazine interview. Prodigy took a shot at Jay-Z's line about New York being soft after Snoop Dogg's moment at the Source Awards, and that comment hit a nerve. What makes it interesting is that Jay-Z was actually a fan of Prodigy's lyricism before any of this started. Havoc explained that Jay-Z respected Prodigy's pen heavy, but once Prodigy spoke on him publicly, Jay-Z's competitive switch flipped hard. The response came fast and heavy. Jay-Z fired back with Takeover, one of the most famous diss tracks ever, and at Summer Jam 2001, he took things to another level by flashing a childhood photo of Prodigy wearing a dance outfit on the big screen. That moment became instant hip-hop history. But here's the part people forget. The beef didn't last forever. Havoc recalled a tense moment at a restaurant where things could have gone left, but instead, both sides cooled it down and agreed to keep it strictly music. Before Prodigy's passing in 2017, the two had already made peace. Jay-Z later said he had super respect for Prodigy, showing that what fans thought was deep hatred was really just competitive rap energy. So, where does all this leave us? Let's bring it back full circle. Keef D is sitting in a Las Vegas jail cell claiming innocence after years of self-incriminating statements. His trial is scheduled for August 2026, and prosecutors say they're confident they can secure a conviction. And I'm innocent, man. That right there sounds like regret talking. That's Keef D realizing he said too much, too loud for too long. He's basically admitting he shouldn't have ever opened his mouth, but it's way too late now. The damage is done. His memoir, the interviews, the on-camera confessions, they're all being stacked against him in court. And while he's sitting behind bars trying to walk things back, investigators are still digging. The connections to bigger names haven't disappeared. They're still under review. Tupac's family has reportedly brought in private investigators to examine possible involvement from powerful figures. And with everything that's been coming out recently about certain industry giants, people are wondering what else might still surface. As for Jay-Z, his place in this story isn't simple. He was targeted by Tupac. He prepared a response. But when Tupac died, Jay-Z chose not to release it. His career absolutely rose during the power vacuum left by Tupac and Biggie, but he also put in relentless work to become the mogul he is today. He sampled Tupac's music, paid respect to his legacy, and publicly honored Afeni Shakur. Jay-Z later reflected on the tension, saying it was never truly personal and that whatever animosity existed died with Tupac. That speaks volumes. And maybe that's the real lesson hip-hop keeps learning the hard way. Beef isn't just lyrics and ego. It comes with real consequences. Tupac and Biggie never got the chance to move past theirs. Others like Jay-Z and Mobb Deep did, choosing growth over destruction. Tupac's sister called Keef D's arrest a pivotal moment. After nearly 30 years of silence, rumors, and conspiracy theories running wild through the culture, the case might finally be moving towards accountability. It may not bring Tupac back, but for the first time in decades, it feels like the truth might actually be catching up. The Shakur family has waited longer than many people watching this have even been alive for this moment. Decades of pain, silence, and unanswered questions. And while no conviction can ever bring Tupac back, and no courtroom decision can undo the loss of one of the greatest artists hip-hop has ever seen, it could finally give his family and the fans some sense of peace. But here's the hard truth. As long as the full story stays buried, as long as questions about alleged involvement from powerful figures still linger, and as long as debates rage over who really pulled the trigger versus what the streets know but refuse to say, Tupac's murder will never stop haunting hip-hop. This case lives on in the shadows. It gets whispered about in studios, argued over on podcasts, and broken down endlessly on YouTube channels just like this one. The culture lost two kings in back-to-back years, Tupac Shakur in 1996 and the notorious B.I.G. in 1997, two pillars of the art form. both gone before they even reached 20 years old. Their music never stopped playing. Their influence never faded. Every rapper who picks up a microphone today is standing on something they built, and yet we're still here trying to understand how it all went so wrong and why. From the blood spilled on the Las Vegas Strip to confessions made years later behind bars, from the East Coast versus West Coast war to Jay-Z's complicated place in the aftermath, these stories keep evolving. These new revelations are forcing people to rethink everything they thought they knew about Tupac Shakur's murder. Dots that floated around for decades are now starting to connect. Street violence, industry politics, and power at the very top of the hip-hop pyramid, all tied together in ways that still shock people to this day. If you made it this far, show love by hitting that like button, subscribing, and dropping a comment with your thoughts. Do you believe Keef D's new claims of innocence, or do you think the truth already spoke years ago?
And that's where this story ends for now. The Shakur family's still waiting, the streets are still quiet, and the truth is still fighting its way to the surface. Decades later, Tupac Shakur's murder remains one of the darkest shadows hanging over hip-hop. What started as music turned into real-world consequences. Egos, alliances, street politics, and industry power all collided, and two legends never made it out alive. Tupac and Biggie are gone, but the questions refuse to die. Keef D says he's innocent. Prosecutors say the evidence is overwhelming, and until that courtroom finally delivers answers, this case will keep haunting the culture. So now it's on you. What do you believe? Was the truth already told years ago, or is there still something massive waiting to come out? If you made it to the end, show love by hitting that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video so the conversation keeps going. Drop your thoughts in the comments. We're reading everything. This story isn't over yet, and neither is the search for the truth.